Hi guys, I wanted to make a video sharing all the books that I want to read before this year ends. So my reading goal for this year is 40 books, and by now I have read I think around 24 books. I don't know the exact number, but it's 20 something books. So I have around 20 books still left to be read this year, and there are a lot of books on my shelf, and I think I have read like 50% or maybe 60% of these books. So there are a lot of books on this shelf that I haven't read, and I feel really bad about that. So, what I've decided is I'm not going to buy a lot of books this year. Instead, I'm going to finish all the books that are on this shelf, unless and until it's a book that I have been waiting to read forever. For example, the Powerless series. So, I will go out and buy the second book of the series and the novella that is powerful and reckless as well. But if there are certain books that I am not dying to read, so I will just, forbid myself from buying any more books and instead focus on the books that are behind me. So, in this video, I wanted to share with you a list of books that I plan to read by the end of this year. And I have around 20 something books over here, right in front of me on my table, and I can't wait to get into all of those. Now, I'm just going to share these books randomly. I have not categorized them into different stacks. So the first book that I have with me is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I feel extremely ashamed that I still haven't read this book. If you are a reader, and even if you are not a reader, I'm 100% sure you all must have at least heard of this book. It is extremely popular. I have no idea what this is about. I think it's a motivational kind of a book. I don't know. It seems to be a quick read. It is just 309 pages. I think I might be able to finish it in like 3 or 4 days. So this is the first book that I have in my TBR. The other book that I have with me is Tuesdays with Maury by Mitch Albom. Again, I'm 100% sure you all must have heard about this book, and I feel very ashamed that I haven't read this book either. And this book has been on my shelf for so long. I think it's been more than a year now since I bought this book and decided that I am going to read this, but I still haven't gotten the opportunity to do that. So I am really hoping that I get to do that this year. The third book that I have is The Song of Achilles by Miller. So this is the same author who wrote Circe. If I have that book as well, and I haven't read it, but I haven't included that book in this tag because I'm not dying to read it in this year. But I have heard so many good things about this book. Two of my friends recommended this book to me, and they said it's very different, and the way that she writes feels like a poem. Loved her writing style. So, and it is a very different book, but I have been putting this off for so long because it's Greek mythology, I think, and it just felt something that I might not be too comfortable reading. I don't know, because I haven't read any Greek mythology apart from The Silent Patient, which had a little hints of it, but just a little bit, so it wasn't that too much talking about that. So again, really looking forward to read this. It says it's the winner of the Orange Prize 2012. That's good. This is going to be probably the next book that I pick up. Currently, I'm reading Powerless by Lauren Roberts, and I think I'm gonna pick this book up next. Another book that I have is Around the World in 80 Days. Now, this book was recommended to me by a very close friend who says that this is the only book that he has read in his entire life, and he ended up loving it. And so I really wanted to try this out myself. It says that it's a very mind-boggling kind of a book, and by the end of it, you're gonna be like, what happened? So that is why I included this as well. I don't know when I want to read this, because I don't know when I'm going to pick up this book, because to be honest, it's not very appealing to me, but he is really after me to go and read this book. So that's why I've included this in the stack, and I think I'm going to pick it up in like maybe in August. No idea. Now, next book that I have that I'm planning to read after The Song of Achilles is Daisy Jones and the Six. It is extremely popular book. I'm sure you all must have heard of this book. It's by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now, I have read only one book by her, which is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I read it years back, and I remember I really, really loved that book. And when I first heard of this, I didn't know if I'm gonna like this or not because it's about a band, I believe. But then I saw that a show has come out, and there are a lot of my friends as well as a lot of YouTubers that I saw that absolutely loved this book. And thus, I really want to give this book a try. So I think I'm gonna pick it up very, very soon in the month of August. Next book that we have is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Now, all of these books are actually very, very popular books, and I have picked these up because I have been wanting to read these books for years now. They have been on my shelf, sitting there for so many years. Some books have been sitting in my shelf for like 3 years, which is extremely shameful. And one of those books is The Midnight Library. I wasn't sure if I want to read this book because some I have heard really, really, mixed reviews about this book. Some people ended up loving it, but there are a lot of people who did not like it as much, which is not something which obviously demotivated me a bit. But there was one person that I started talking on Instagram, and she mentioned that it's one of her favorite books. So I was like, I do have this sitting on my shelf, and I am planning to, pick up the books that I already have on my shelf. So why not go and read this book? Next book, another extremely, extremely popular book, is called A Man Called Ove. No idea. This is by Frederick Backman, and I think I have one more book by him. Yeah, it's here. It's called Anxious People. Now, I am not planning to read The Anxious People in this year. I don't think so, because firstly, I want to read this one before moving on to that book, and thus I have not included it in this video. But A Man Called Ove is, I've heard it's a very emotional read. I've seen a lot of people on YouTube crying while reading this book, and most of the books are not able to bring out that emotion in me that I will start crying, except from, I think there are only two books that have made me cry. So I'm really looking forward to read this one. I think a movie is also coming out on this book, and I forgot to mention that there is a show on Daisy Jones and the Six, and that's another reason why I want to pick up that book, because I'm that kind of a person who wants to read a book before going and watching the movie or the show. So yeah, and I think a movie is already out or is coming out. I don't remember that. But yeah, it's another book that I'm really looking forward to read this year. Moving on to the next book, we have Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. But this book is again very popular. I have heard it a lot of at a lot of places, and it's a very, very quick read. It's like 200 pages, and I actually have the entire series of this, except apart from the second book, I believe, which is weird. I mentioned that in my video of, I think, how much I realistically read in a week, and there was a bookstore where there were all of the series of this book apart from the second one, so I just ended up buying it. I really hope I like this book because, again, I have the series, but I haven't even read the first one, which I think most of us do. Now, next is The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. If you guys don't know, Lynn Painter is the author who wrote Better Than the Movies. This is that book. I read this book this year, and I remember I really liked it. It was very unexpected because I don't know, I don't relate too much with high school romances, but that book was really sweet, and I think I gave that book a 4 stars. And so when I saw this book at a bookstore, I just wanted to buy this book at that time. So I don't know when I'm going to read this though. All the romances that I have in my stack, I want to read those before September, because October, November, and December and January for me is the month of thrillers and fantasies. So if I'm not able to read all of these books like The Midnight Library, maybe not The Midnight Library, but all the romance books and books like Before the Coffee Gets Cold and all. So I want to get those done in till September so that I can move on to thrillers and fantasies. Now, next book that I'm sure you all must have heard of, 100% sure, and I think even read, 80% of you would have read this book. It is extremely popular. It used to be extremely popular, but now I see a lot of hate on this author all over Instagram. I have no idea what she did apart from, I think I read a quote from her book Ugly Love. So it's called It Ends With Us. I have heard so many, I have watched so many videos on Instagram of people saying that this is a book that got them into reading. And this book has been sitting in my shelf for like more than 2 years now. And I just never got to reading it because I just started seeing so many hate on Colleen Hoover and that she writes stupid plot. I don't know. So I just got pretty demotivated to read this book, and but I really want to read this and just get it over with. This is the first, no, this will be the second book that I will read by her. The first book that I read by her was Verity, which I really loved at that moment, but now I have conflicting thoughts over. But yeah, It Ends With Us is also in my TBR for this year. Now next we have Nicholas Sparks' book. It's called The Choice. Let your heart decide. Now, one thing about me, when I started reading when I was in high school, I only used to read two authors, Sidney Sheldon and Nicholas Sparks. These two are the authors that got me into reading. And I just love the way Nicholas Sparks writes. It's so beautiful, heart touching. And the fact that I mentioned, previously that there are only two books that have been able to make me cry. One of those was by Nicholas Sparks called The Guardian. So I picked up this book from a bookshelf and from a bookstore, and at the end there are some beautiful pictures from, I think, stills from a movie, and I really want to watch this movie, and so I really want to read this book by this year, and I think I'm going to pick this up after I read Daisy Jones and the Six. Next, we have You've Reached Sam by Justin Thau. I remember the time when this book just took Instagram, the whole world, by a storm. This book was everywhere. It was all over Instagram. People were reading this, people were crying while reading this, and I wasn't too inclined towards reading this book because we all know, I think, what's going to happen. It's a sad book, and I think you get to know it from the back of the book what really happens. So I wish I hadn't read the back of the book, but since I already know what's going to happen, I had started reading this book. I have a bookmark. I had read 28 pages of this book, but just left it. I don't know why. It's not that I was hating it, because then I would have remembered, but I just wasn't feeling maybe of reading an emotional book at that point of a time. Next is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Now, Emily Henry is the author that I really want to love, but I don't know what's happening, but I'm just not enjoying her books. So I read Beach Read. Beach Read was the first book that I read by her, and I read that years ago, so I don't remember anything that happened in that book. But I did give that a 5 stars, but I don't remember what happened, so it was probably not a 5 star. But the second book that I read by her was Happy Place, which I did not end up loving at all. I gave that book a 3 star. Please don't hate me for that. But if you want a detailed review, it's in my book. It's in my video called the 24-hour reading challenge. I did that. I read that book in that video, and it was just a pretty disappointing read. So, but there is so much love for Emily Henry and Happy Place and all of her books all over Instagram, and that's why I had bought this book when I had bought Happy Place. So, since I didn't like Happy Place that much, I'm a little bit skeptical about reading this book, but I am pretty sure I'm gonna pick it up in some, I don't know, in this year. I'm planning to go on some beachy vacation, and this is one book that I will be taking with me. Now, the other book that I am planning to take with me on the vacation that I will be taking this year to a beach, most probably, is Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. I know nothing. By the way, I'm not telling the synopsis of any of the books that I'm talking about. It's because I don't know the synopsis of the books, of those books that I'm talking about, and I am the kind of person who loves to go into books blind, unless and until, I don't know. I just love to go into books blind, and that's why I don't read the back of the books most of the time, and that's why I'm not sharing the synopsis of all the books that I'm sharing in this video. Now, Every Summer After, all I know about this book is that there were two people who were in love, but they stopped talking to each other because of some reason. And then they are reunited again because someone dies. That is all I know. And I don't want to know who dies or why they're not talking or what happens. I don't want to read the back of the book, and so that is all that I know about Every Summer After. But I'm really looking forward to read this one. Now we have a stack of thrillers. So the first book that we have is The Fury by Alex Michaelides. This is the author that wrote The Silent Patient, which I really, really loved. Ended up giving it 5 stars years back. Now this is another book by him, and I have actually heard mixed reviews about this book, but still I really want to read this. So this book is a murder mystery, and all I know about this book is that it is based on a private Greek island. I mean, it happens on a private Greek island where a former movie star invites a select group of friends to stay. That is all I know. I'm not going to read the back of the book. This is something that I already knew beforehand, but I had just completely forgotten. What I've heard about this book is that it is told in a sort of a way which feels like the author is making you sit in front of him and telling you the story, which I found really interesting because I have, of course, not seen that happening in most of the books. So this is another book that I have on my shelf. Now next is Killjoy by Holly Jackson. Now if you guys don't know who Holly Jackson is, she's the one who wrote A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, the whole series. It has 3 books. The first one, I must be having it somewhere. This is the series. The first one is called A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Second is Good Girl Bad Blood, and the third book is As Good as Dead. Now it is a YA mystery, murder mystery, and I absolutely loved reading this book. I gave I think each and every book a 5 star, and the whole series, of course, is a 5 star. And this is a prequel, you can say, to that book. And I've always wanted to read this. I actually didn't know that this book even existed. I just saw one message, someone replied on my Instagram story saying that, have you read this book? And I was like, I didn't even know that it existed. And I was pretty taken aback by that. So I'm really looking forward to read Killjoy. Now, next book is Found by Erin Kinsley. I don't remember picking up this book. I don't know. There are some books over here that I picked up from like a book fair, but I don't remember. I think I ordered this from Amazon. It's about a missing child who returned, but no one knows who took him. So it's a mystery, and that is all I know about this book. But I'm really looking forward to read all of these books in winter time or in the month of fall. Now, next is Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. Lisa Jewell is another very, very famous author, but I don't know anything about this book apart from that I have seen this book everywhere. Earlier, it was very famous, and I saw a couple of bookstagrammers recommending this book, and I just ordered it. So I'm going to read this one this year, hopefully. Next, we have Five Survive by Holly Jackson. Now, another Holly Jackson book in my TBR. I have absolutely no idea what this book is about. I feel pretty bad that I'm not able to share a synopsis with you guys in this video, but like I said, I like to go into books blind, but it's a thriller. That's all I know. Now, next 2 books I picked up at a book fair. Both of them are thrillers, of course. First is I Let You Go, and second is called The Husband's Secret. Both of those I checked. Both of these 2 books are extremely, extremely high rated on Goodreads, and that's why I picked them up. And really looking forward to read both of these books. So on the cover of I Let You Go, it says a tragic accident and a past you can't escape. A tragic accident. It all happened so quickly. She couldn't have prevented it, could she? So, yeah, this is. And the last book that I have is The Husband's Secret, the #1 bestseller. So I really want to get these books, read these books, because when I had picked them up from the book fair, I had thought to myself that I'm going to read these as soon as I can, because there was absolutely no need for me to be going to a book fair and buying so many books when I already have so many on my TBR shelf. But yeah, that's why I'm making it a point to read these books this year. Now, another book, I think it's a historical fiction, is called The Palace of Illusions by Chitra Banerjee. Now, I shared this book in my How Much I Read Realistically as a software engineer video, and I got a few comments saying that I should really read this one, and that's why I feel I really want to pick this up, but it's a book that it is extremely out of my comfort zone. It is a kind of book that I don't really pick up, but I want to this time. Actually, read the back of this book earlier, so it is about a woman's take on Mahabharat, and it is narrated by the point of view of Panchali. So let me read the back of the book for you. So it's narrated by Panchali, wife of the five Pandav brothers. The novel traces her life from fiery birth and lonely childhood, where her beloved brother is her only true companion, through her complicated friendship with the enigmatic Krishna, to marriage, motherhood, and a secret attraction to the mysterious man who is her husband's most dangerous enemy. I, of course, know Mahabharat. I've watched the TV series as well. And I had no idea about this last line, secret attraction to the mysterious man who is her husband's most dangerous enemy. At least I don't have any recollection of that, and that's why I'm really looking forward to read this. But I think I'm going to take my sweet time reading this book and maybe read another book while reading this because I don't want to get into a slump. Now, moving on to non-fiction books. Now, if you guys don't know, I have made it a point to read one non-fiction book every single month. And so there are two non-fiction books that I picked up last month. One was called Rework, which is, I saw one of Ali Abdal's videos in which he was recommending this book. It changes the way you work. It changes your mindset when it comes to working a 9 to 5 or just working in general, I believe. So that is all I know about this. But yeah, I'm going to read this. Now, another book that I'm going to read is The Courage to Be Disliked. So this is one of the books that one of my friends really, really loved, and she recommended me to read this book a while back. And when I saw this at a bookstore, I just had to pick it up. This is probably going to be the first non-fiction book that I read in the month of August. But let's see. The other nonfiction book I want to read is Friends, Lovers, and Big Terrible Thing, which is an autobiography, I believe, by Matthew Perry. I picked up this book after, of course, after his demise, and I have been the kind of person I've watched Friends 4 times, and it has been really hard for me to watch Friends now. I just started watching it, but of course, it is pretty hard for me to watch that show. So when I heard that he has his autobiography out, and I just saw this picture. So it has a lot of pictures as well, which I love, and I just picked up this book and I knew that I had to read it about his life and about his struggles with yeah. So I'm going to read this book this in the month of August, I believe, after I read The Courage to Be Disliked. So we have three more non-fiction books to talk about. I feel like we have a huge, ambitious stack of TBR. Let me just count how many books I've shared with you. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 25. I've shared 25 books with you. I'm going to keep these two back because I know I won't be able to read those books. So, the only nonfiction book that I have is How to Win Friends and Influence People. As the name suggests, it tells you how you can win friends and influence people. And one of my friends recommended this book to me. The friend who read and loved The Courage to Be Disliked, she was like, "You have to read this book," and that's when I bought it. But I never read it, so I'm going to make it a point to read this book sometime this year. Now, coming to the books that I don't have a physical copy of yet, and let me go to my Notion. I had written down those books somewhere. So the first book that we have is The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. I have absolutely no idea what that book is about, but I know that Riley Sager is extremely, extremely popular author, and this book by him is extremely popular. Now, the second book that I have is The Last Word. These are two books, The Last Word and No Exit. I will be removing The Last Word from my very, very ambitious TBR, and I have No Exit by Taylor Adams. So I was scrolling through Hotstar today. I feel, yeah, today I was scrolling through Hotstar and I saw this movie. No, I saw this movie, No Exit, and I was like, I have heard about this book, and I went to my Amazon a wish list, and this book was there, and I was like, I really have to read this book because I really want to watch that movie. There is something about me, something with me about reading, about watching movies that are, book adaptations, and thus I just wrote that book in my list, and I don't have the physical copy yet, but I will order it only when. I will be in 100% mood to read it. Now, I have uh, The 7 Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I don't think I need to talk a lot about this book. It is very, very popular. I think it's a kind of a fantasy, because all I know about this book is that there is a woman who lives in an apartment, and one day she returns to her apartment and she finds that the time has moved 7 years into the past. So extremely, extremely different book. I have not read anything like that, and that is in my TBR, but I don't have the physical copy yet. I will buy it only when I will decide that I want to read this book next. Okay, now I forgot. Okay, I forgot that I have this book, Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. So I had written Ruthless Vows, and then I remembered that I did not talk about Divine Rivals at all. I had started reading this book. I had dog-eared this page. So I had read 30 pages. I was reading this book when I was filming that video again of how much I realistically read. So I was reading this book and then I switched to Powerless. Not because I wasn't liking it, but because it was a bit slow for me and I just wanted a fast-paced thriller kind of a book. But yeah, this is another book that is on my list. And when the time comes of reading fantasy and thriller books, I'm definitely going to be picking that one up. And if I liked it, I think I'm going to read Ruthless Vows, which is the second book in this series as well. Now, the last book that we have is actually three books, the last three books that we have. So, like I said, I'm reading Powerless by Lauren Roberts. So, this is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I'm sure you all must have heard about this book, extremely popular. And so it has a novella which came after Powerless, which is called Powerful. And I think it is from the point of view of her best friend. So let me tell you what this book is about in case you haven't heard of it. Now, this book is, of course, a fantasy book and it is based in Ilya. So we have two kinds of peoples over here. We have ordinaries and the second are elites. Now, ordinaries are the people who don't have any powers, and elites are the people who do have powers. Now, the motto or what the king wants to do is kill all of those ordinaries, and our main character, Payden, is an ordinary who is posing to be an elite. So she is posing to be a psychic. All of these you will find at the back of the book. Now, what happens is that she encounters Kai in a certain situation, which you will get to know when you read that book. It's not at the back, so I'm not going to tell you about that. And she encounters him for the second time. She is pushed into these deadly trials, which are extremely high stake, and she is pushed into there. And of course, she meets Kai, and then we have their romance, and then we have the trials. So far, my thoughts about this book is that I'm loving it. I feel it is not going to be a 5 star because it's not as high stakes as I was thinking it to be. And what I like is it's actually YA, which I wasn't aware of, and it's extremely, extremely slow burn. I love slow burn books, but it did not feel a lot. It doesn't didn't feel like an extreme enemies to lovers or extreme what do you call it, high stakes kind of a book. Like when you read Akota, there is only one scene that happens in which Feyre is trying to save her life, and that little scene, I mean, it's not little, it goes on for pages long. I mean, it's the end of the last 100 pages. It's so fast paced, it keeps you on the edge of your seat. I did not get that feeling with this book, and I did not feel a lot of sparks between Payden and Kai. I think I'm gonna get a lot of hate for saying that, but yeah, I am about to finish this book. So it has a novella which is called Powerful, which I really want to read, and the next book that I really want to read is Reckless, which is the second book that came out in this series. So the last book that we have in this extremely ambitious TBR of all the books that I want to read before 2024 is called Lightlark by Alex Astor. Now, this is a part of a series. It's called the Lightlark Saga series. It's a fantasy. I have seen a lot of reels, a lot of uh, fan art of this book, and that really tempted me to read this book, but I still haven't gotten the physical copy because it wasn't available on Amazon when I was trying to buy it earlier. So this is the last book that I have. I actually also had planned to read one whole series called Throne of Glass, but I don't feel I will be able to read it in this year because I really want to read all the books that are on my shelf first, like I've said around 100 times. So these are all the books that I want to read by the end of this year. And let me know if you guys have read any of these books, or if these books are also in your TBR for the year or coming years as well. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. And maybe stick around to see if I end up reading these books or not, and my reviews on the same. And I will see you in my next video.